Welcome everyone to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to gain insights, learn new tricks, and answer of what is change management. I'm your co-host, Chris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on September 29th, 2024. Chris. We're already 3/4 of a way through the year. I can't believe it.
Don't remind me, man. It went by fast.
It went by fast. Soon, lots of changes. Speaking of changes, did you update your phone to the new iOS 18?
I did last week.
I did last night, and I also updated my Mac to the latest
I have
OS
to do
2.
that.
You have to do it because the two of them together is amazing. There's a lot to it.
That's
a lot
a
of
change.
changes.
Yeah.
A lot of changes into your behavior. The iPhone mirroring is my favorite. I wish I had learned how to change management that process, but
you could demo better now with your mobile device, right?
you can do everything better with it. You can open up apps on your phone on your Mac.
Ooh,
it's amazing. A lot of changes.
amazing.
All
Lots
new
of
changes
changes.
I'm learning to figure out. But speaking of changes, today we had the opportunity to speak with Nellie Brown about change management through an implementation.
I heard the
Good
countdown.
Hey,
Good morning.
You heard the end of my countdown? You came in?
Hey, 3,
morning.
2, 1. That's
Yes.
Good
3, 2,
morning.
Wait, 3, 2, 1. Am I recording?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
you're recording.
Okay.
good. You tell me.
Yeah. No, we're recording. It's we just had to give. We did our little exercises.
What are they actually? Like, what do you do? Or is that a secret, trade secret?
It's a trade secret.
Okay.
It's behind the scenes. That's
You do-
exclusive.
You do the turkey gobble.
Don't tell anyone, Chris. It's an all
Hey,
exclusive.
it's all that turkey. That's just one process, right? Just the turkey gobble and then
That's
a
it.
bunch of other
That's
stuff.
Okay, I was trying
a
to
bunch
picture.
of other stuff.
I was trying to picture what you guys were doing while I was waiting.
No, we're going to have an exclusive all access VIP pass
Okay.
for the behind the scenes. What
Okay.
happens before the episode?
What does one need to do to get one of these VIP passes?
It's arbitrary.
Okay. That's helpful.
I think
Really helpful.
it's really helpful. Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you for taking the time to speak with us. I've
You're
been
welcome.
looking forward to this conversation for some time. And what's interesting is how this came about
Hmm.
because, and Chris, I don't know if I shared the story with you or not, with how we lined up speaking with Nellie here. And I always want to start singing. Which one do you want to sing? Do you want to sing Nelly Furtado? do you
Or
wanna
Nelly
sing
the rapper?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Give us a verse, Nelly. Give us
Uh,
one of them.
I'm like a bird.
Okay. I fly away.
Yeah, I'm not going to sing.
Oh, okay.
If you want your listeners to leave right now, I will sing.
I think listening to Chris and I, they'll leave anyway, but that's okay.
Uh,
The interesting point with this was that I'm a big advocate for test automation as well as source control, source code, depending on what you talk about management, which in essence is change management for applications. So I had come across some information shared by Nellie, and I said, oh, this is a great topic to have on the podcast. So we started talking back and forth about change management.
Yeah.
The whole time I'm talking about software application change management, and she wasn't.
No.
So then finally, after we exchanged back and forth, talking about the podcast, talking about what we could talk about going on, she goes, wait a minute.
I'll tell you what did it, but yeah.
Oh, you can tell me what did it. Go ahead.
Well, he says something about CAL, AL extensions. I know roughly what that is with Business Central Online, the new, whatever. And I'm like, I don't think we're talking about the same type of change management, Brad, but it's still interesting. So, I mean, I don't know how interested
how
you'd
long
be
that
in
conversation.
it went for a bit until it was like, okay, yeah, but it was fun.
Yeah. And then we realized we were talking about two things.
Which is important. It's important to distinguish between those two.
It was important,
Yeah.
and it also brought light to me. And ever since that conversation, I don't know if it's like when you buy a new vehicle,
Yeah.
everybody on the road has that vehicle.
Yeah.
But now all I hear is change management from the implementation side, which I never put a term on it, but we all speak about and all talk about because it's an important part of an implementation.
Very.
So it's someone will either go through an upgrade or implantation.
Damn it, I was going to do it first.
Oh, see,
Implantation.
that's the other part because you know how my old eyes, I don't know who had the typo. Was
It was
me
me.
that had the typo? Or was it you? Yeah.
No, it was me.
See, I don't even notice these things because my eyes at this
Yeah.
point. We did a typo, or Miss Nelly did a typo for implantation.
Yeah, and then I realized it, and then I was like, oh, shoot, I meant implementation. And then it was like, no, actually, implantation makes sense because you're sort of implanting a thing into an organism, which is the organization. So now it's implantations. And
There you go.
See, Chris,
I'm
working
just gonna say that.
implantations.
Coin that.
yeah, I'm coining
is.
it. Makes sense.
It makes sense. But to take it back, this is what we talk about often is, and I don't even know if the word is proper, like, user adoption or what
Yeah.
an organization has to go through as they migrate to a newer version of an ERP application or any application. I mean, the change management is not just ERP. It's the focus for what we talk about. But anything that you're introducing new to an organization, it's not only the application that you need to manage the changes for, it's the business. And how can you implement that within an organization to make sure that you have that? Is it user adoption? Is that the proper term?
I don't like that word so much because, I always use this example when we went from an older ERP that nobody's heard of to Business Central Online. We had 100% user adoption because we turned off access to the old system. So that like to me is like, okay, I can say it was a success because 100% user adoption. I forced them into it. We forced them into it. But how do they feel about using it? What were the challenges, the struggles? All of that is not captured in, I think, adoption rates. So I like to say like embracing or, something along those terms. How are people embracing the new solution? And that's what, really the focus of the type of change management that I'm interested in. When we're implanting new solutions.
It's a vital part of an implementation. I think it's even more important than the application because without the user acceptance, user adoption, or the users being able to use the application, it can't be successful. Because if a user cannot do what they're tasked to do in their job, then it is not a successful implementation at the end. If you look back at it, the application may work perfectly.
Yes.
But if it doesn't work perfectly for a business or the users don't know how to use it, then you have a problem.
Well, there's a change formula that I always refer to. This was coined or developed by General Electric when they were developing their change management practice or philosophy in the 90s. So it's E equals Q times Q times the effectiveness of a solution is equal to the quality of the solution times the acceptance of that solution. And it's multiplicative. It's not addition. It's not like the quality of the solution plus the acceptance. It's times the acceptance. So if you have zero acceptance, the value of your solution is zero. It can be an amazing product and an amazing solution that nobody uses. Then what's it worth?
Yeah, I like the difference you made that adoption and embracing and accepting it's very different because adopting you're kind of you have to use it, right? You're adopting to it. But do you like it? Was it successful? Did it do exactly what you want it to do? It's different because a lot of people tend to be upset for a couple months and eventually they'll embrace it, but it's a tough couple months that you have to unravel.
And I still hear it's been 4 years since we went on Business Central Online, and I hate this system. I hate this piece of that. So, but that's, I think, because we did change management wrong in the beginning. A lot of that.
But before we jump into that, and continue down talking about that fancy formula as well as the topic of change management, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I don't know. It's been a winding road. I was kind of in the academic world, and I did a master's in political science. And then I was doing a PhD in bioethics, and I just kind of got jaded in the academic world, and it was just not where I wanted to be, and I ended up in a business development role, which is where I'm working now. And it was nothing that I ever imagined I'd be doing. I grew up thinking like, ew, business, ugh, it's gross, it's like icky, I don't like sales. And then I fell in love with that, and just the whole psychology of sales and interactions with people and that whole piece of it. And then I think things really turned around when we were acquired. We were a distributor for our current parent company, and went through an acquisition. We were on the acquired side, and that came with a whole slew of changes, one of which was the new system, but it was compounded and embedded in a much bigger change, a cultural change, branding change, like how our processes, all of it. And one big piece of it was the Business Central implementation. It was hard, and that's how I got involved in change management, because I was responsible for for a team that was going to be adopting and using the system, and they hated it, and we got a lot of pushback, a lot of questions, and what are we doing wrong? And that's when I started researching, and I didn't even know there was a thing called change management. And then I got certified by like the leading change management certification organization, ProSci, and that was kind of the start of it. And I've been researching and looking at different ways to do it. And really, I think what the conclusion I've come to is that it's common sense. A lot of us do change management and just don't even really call it that. And it doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to consider complexity, because people are complex and systems are complex. So anyway, it's just this whole thing that I fell in love with, and I started applying those principles actively in my organization and my team, and also outside of our location. And it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference in how people feel about using the system and the success rate, however you want to define that.
It is. It's a huge part of a successful implementation, and to hear that someone's not happy with the system, I take a lot of those comments with a grain of salt, as they say, because you can't please everybody. But if you have that much dissatisfaction, misery breeds company, I guess you could say. So if you have someone who's dissatisfied, you have to figure out why. And is it that they weren't properly trained? Is it that they're just somebody who doesn't understand what they're doing or what they need to do or why they're doing it? It's important to find to it. But when it comes to change management, how would you define or explain what change management is for an implementation?
Yeah, so usually I refer to two quotes, and then I'll elaborate on those. So you're familiar with project management. There's a quote by Justin Blasky. He's really cool. He's on LinkedIn. He does these posts on his page, Idea Leap. And so he says project management is the tasks to be done, and change management is aligning everyone around the tasks to be done. So it's getting everybody aligned around the same vision, whether it's the people implementing the solution or the people who are going to be using the solution. So that's one kind of brief intro into it and how I think of it. And the other one is, this is by Sharon Connolly. She's down in Australia, and she says something along the lines of, we moved the bread from aisle 3 to aisle 13. Change management is making sure everyone has toast the next morning. So think about everything that has to be done to accomplish that, so that it's seamless, so that we still get the value that we're looking for, but who was involved in making that happen, and what had to happen, all of that, it comprises change management. So I think of it as the practices, the approaches, the mindsets that enable a solution to be successful and enable the acceptance of a solution. And there are many different ways to go about it, and lots of tools. But I think for me, context matters the most. You have to be aware of the context that you're in, who you're working with, what you're doing. And there's no one size fits all approach. I mean, if there's anything I would stress is that you can't just like take a model and plop it into every situation. You know it, working with people. And things change as you're going along, as you know, like things come up that you have to accommodate for. So you have to be aware of context and be flexible.
No, it's often overlooked. And I know sometimes working with the implementations, individuals think that, oh, it's just because we have a new system, everything will just work without what has to go behind it. And I like the point that you brought up, that there isn't a one size fits all to an ERP implementation or to any implementation. I think there's not many things that are cookie cutter. I think even cooking cookies in an oven, depending upon the oven you're using, it may be you can have some similarities, but it may be a slightly different
with
process,
the humidity, when you're making your dough, like all of it.
Yeah, so you can have a standard there, but it is, and that's one important thing to realize is that you can have a standard that you can follow, but that standard isn't going to apply to everybody uniformly. You may have some variances along the way. And also the users that are using it are important. So with the change management, identifying what change management is, which is more on the talent side of an organization or a business that they're working with it, how can you what can effectively be done to go through this process of change management or managing changes? Like what type of process should someone follow?
Can you hold that thought and like remember the question? Because I forgot to do our game.
Oh, so, hold on. Remember the thought.
Remember the question that you just asked, because I forgot it already.
I will probably forget.
The process is something of...
I will remember the question.
Okay. I asked you to have your papers and pens and notebooks.
I have my
handy.
handy dandy notebook and my
Chris,
pen.
you got yours?
Yep.
Okay. So in very few words, like 3 or 4 or 5 words, a short sentence, write down how you feel about Business Central implementations. Very briefly, just write a short sentence. What does it make you feel? That's hard, I know.
That is tough.
You should play some hold music while you think. Or like a couple of words that you associate with an implementation. 2, 3 words.
With what aspect? Just in
anything.
general?
With the first thing that comes to mind. Whatever. Anything. That's not the point of the exercise.
All right.
Okay. Chris is done.
Hold on one second. Gosh, I'm at a loss of words. Believe that one. How I feel about a Business Central implementation.
Did you put something down?
No.
No? Okay.
I love exercises.
I like this too, but now see, I
makes
take
me
it so
think.
It puts you on the
serious
spot.
that I need to...
It really doesn't matter what you say. That's not the point.
See, Brad, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't
matter.
Play it, but it doesn't matter. It's like adoption, right? You're gonna adopt. It doesn't matter.
Just do it because I told you to.
Done.
Okay, Chris goes
Doesn't make
first. Do you
sense,
mind?
but I put the words down.
Would you mind sharing, Chris, what you wrote?
Sure. What do I feel when I do a Business Central implementation? Well, being in the space for quite some time, and I'm sure Brad as well. I think what I get out of it is the joy that it brings. Okay, so I'll just read what I said.
Yes, I prefer that. Yeah.
I enjoy the value it brings to an organization for their future growth.
Okay. Cool. Brad.
Mine is similar. It's strange, but different. Because I was pressured, I put down it's a positive jeez.
Say that again.
A positive journey for success and efficiency within an organization.
Okay. Very nice. So next part of the exercise. Pick up your pen.
Okay. Got it.
Can I see your pen, Chris? Okay. I'll put it in the other hand. Okay. And I hope you're not ambidextrous because you're going to ruin my exercise. Now, you're going to, on a piece of paper, write down 2 words, 3 words that describe the biggest challenges you've had with the Business Central implementation with your non-dominant hand.
With my non-dominant
Yes.
hand. Okay.
Non-dominant hand.
Yeah.
Write down 3.
2 or 3 words, whatever you want to say.
I'm just repeating for
Okay.
those that are playing at home.
Oh, people are playing at home. Okay. I forgot
Write
about
down
those
2
people.
or 3 words
Yes.
for.
A challenge, a challenging aspect of an implementation. Don't cheat. Use your non-dominant hand.
This is like, you know, I mean, these
But
are
how can
big
you
words
cheat?
that I'm writing.
Wait, Chris, you can't use big words.
It's going to be hard.
Okay.
2, 3 words. Okay, I think I have 2. Okay. All right, I'm good.
Okay. So we'll hold until Brad's done.
This would be a fun one.
Sunday
I'm sure
morning.
people would
I
resonate.
know.
Listen, I wrote this with my non-dominant hand.
Okay. Can you show us, like, can I just see what they look like? Okay, kind of, sort of. Okay. Chris, can you read what you wrote? Oh, I mean, that's not bad, Chris.
He
People,
cheated.
community, involvement.
Oh,
Okay.
Or
is it
I
in-
couldn't fit it there. It's communication. So
Communication, sorry. Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
the right people, communication, and involvement.
Not bad for you, non-dom. And Brad, yours?
I put the 3 words that I chose are a lot deeper than the words because there's meaning behind them.
Mm-hmm.
I put time,
Okay.
training,
Okay.
and training covers a lot,
Yes.
as well as testing.
So, how did it feel doing something that you're not used to? I mean, I assume you write with your non-dominant hand.
I'm comfortable
Okay.
using my left hand
Okay. Certainly.
as much as my right hand.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of trying to fit it, but you know, I'm not ambidextrous in any way or
I
form. But
wrote it on the other side. I didn't move my pad.
What about you, Brad? What was your first reaction when
it
I
was
said
challenging.
switch?
Let's just say that.
Switch hands. Okay.
No, it's something that I'm not used to doing. Obviously, you can tell by the lettering and the penmanship that I have.
Your chicken scratch.
Yeah, I write chicken scratch anyway now.
Well, yeah, whether right, dominant or not
It
dominant.
doesn't matter.
I have my chicken scratch is a little more chicken scratchy.
hmm And did you have to think a little bit harder, like just kind of as you did it, or just it was?
I was thinking more. This is my opinion. I was thinking more about the words that
The
I was
words that you-
choosing
Yeah, the exercises.
in this exercise.
Got it. Is there anything that I could have done to better prepare you? Anything I could have said, or the way I said it, or to do it with the other hand?
No, I don't think so. I think the instructions were very clear. It is a little bit more challenging. It took me longer to write.
Yeah.
But I knew what I needed. Like, right, I envisioned already the words that I need to write. It's just the physical part of that is, and time. It took
Execution,
longer.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing again, depending upon what we're measuring this on, having time to practice writing with my non-dominant hand could have made it a little easier to write.
I have one. I wish you told us the purpose of why we're writing this stuff down.
Yeah.
And not just ask questions.
And just
or
ask
tell
you
us
to
to
do it.
do.
Yeah.
Or tell us to do it.
Yeah. So you see where I'm going with this,
I
with
see where you're
change
going.
management.
Yeah.
Like that's the point when we're trying to implement a change or roll out a new initiative. Lots of factors that could make that better and go more smoothly that we can think about in terms of how people feel about it and how you prepare them and how you engage them, all of that. That was I wanted to start with that as a segue into change management. But anyway, that.
No, it's a good point because we just started writing it down and we should have asked why are we doing it.
Well, neither of you said no, I'm not doing it. Because I mean, you could have, and we've heard that before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I see what you're going there. We should have asked. I should have asked at least. It's like, what's the purpose of this exercise?
And we don't, right? Like, I mean,
yes.
We, you know, we're going on a new system. Okay, boss. Like, okay, and yeah, this will lead into a whole slew of things. But that
no,
was
I see where you're going with it. It just you look at. I mean, it's Business Central itself is such a great application, and it's a powerful application, and it has so many features. But to me, it's a tool to do a job. And I'm not saying anything disparaging about Business Central, but if someone doesn't know how to effectively use a tool, then it doesn't matter what it is. I've always said this before. It doesn't matter. For years, I used to say, it doesn't matter if you spend $1 on a new system or $1 million on a new system. If you don't implement it properly, they're the same. Because it's not the dollar value that matters. It's the value that you get out of it in the end as a business that matters. And that often gets overlooked. And then I don't understand why sometimes an ERP implementation has to be painful. It doesn't have to be painful.
It doesn't have to be painful.
And I think it's because I'm going to go on a little tangent. I'm sorry. That's an underestimation of what it takes to get it done. And it's not because it's arduous. It's like we talked about. It's the time, the training to make sure people understand what they're doing, why they're doing. And frankly, to make sure they know what their job is. Because sometimes individuals will do tasks and they don't know why they're doing or what they're doing or how it impacts others. And I click a button, and that's all. They don't know what's the result of it.
Yeah, I think, you know, for people who lives, you know, implementing Business Central or new system, new ERP, it's easy for us to say that, right? It's easy for us, it's easy for me. It's like, I enjoy implementing Business Central. I enjoy the change it brings because that's what we do. This is something we've done for years, decades. But from an organization that's been consistent, or maybe their process is very consistent, and all of a sudden you throw a wrench and say, hey, well, now we're changing a new system. That could be detrimental, not just from an organizational standpoint, but also an individual as well. Because I've been in implementations where the change was so much and they weren't prepared for it that they quit, they leave. This is not for me. It's crazy to think that it's nothing to do with the work, or nothing to do with the organization, and of course getting paid, but the change is so much that they couldn't handle it and they leave. So it's very important. Sometimes those people that leave, you're like subject matter experts, the ones that actually knows the company, that knows the process, and it could be very detrimental to a project. But yeah, it's hard because you're asking me or ask Brad, you know, what do we think about it? I mean, it's what we do every day. It's what we live off of Business Central implementation. But
yeah, and I think, Brad, I mean, you started with kind of that question of value, what the value is for the business, and Chris, you took that a step further, and what's the value for the user? So if we don't have that, I mean, what do I care how this benefits the business if I'm the user, right? Like, how is this going to benefit me day to day? How's it going to make my life easier? How's it going to make me more efficient? Like, all of those things, you need to be convinced that what you're doing is beneficial, sure, to the organization, but also to your day to day. And I think that's where we miss it sometimes. And so going back to the question of like the processes and tools or things that you could do, I think that was your question, Brad. Like,
yes,
how do you go about doing that?
Yes, how do we go about managing change and implementation?
Yeah, lots of processes out there. Lots of methodologies and I take bits and pieces from each. I lean more towards something called lean change, which is, I mean, people can look it up, but it's a lot, it's very visual, and it really focuses on involvement, like very, very, very early on. So before we even decide that we're implementing Business Central or whatever it might be, have a conversation with the people that are going to be involved in that or that are going to be impacted by it. And sometimes that's hard to do. Like, just having that initial conversation is who should be in this conversation. So let me step back a little bit. If you've seen my LinkedIn, I've talked about this. Is like the 5 C's of change that I think are crucial, no matter what methods you use. And I'll show you some actual like tools. But 5 C's. First, context. I think context is, I mentioned this earlier, very, very important. Know what you're working with, know who you're working with, what you're doing, know the background, the history of the organization, like where are these people coming from? Be mindful of context. Co-creation. When you are involved in the implementation early on, and when people have a chance to contribute to what that looks like, you're a lot more likely to get people to be committed to it and to invest in it. And so that leads to the 3rd C, commitment. You want that commitment from people across the board, from your sponsors at the top, from the people doing the implementation on the technical side, and then the people who are using it. And conversation. So first I framed this as communication, and then somebody kindly suggested that I use the word conversation because communication can feel very top down and like one way. And what you really want is dialogue and conversation so that you have a chance to get feedback and ask questions, again, from the people who are going to be impacted by the change. And then complexity, because it's not cookie cutter and we have to be conscious of the nuances of whatever situation that we're in. Do you want me to show you some of like the tools that allow us to do this sort of thing and to get all those elements kind of in place before an implementation or during?
I'm always interested in learning. I think this is such an important part of an implementation. So anything that you have to share that can, spark something to help others that are going through a Business Central implementation is important.
Yeah.
Because to me, this is one of the areas where I see most implementations. I don't know how you define success or failure.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question.
It's one of those things is, I asked the question, someone said, we want to have the system, the system needs to be running by January 1st. Right. So if it's running by January 1st, is that success, or is your business being able to do this a measure of success, or is your users, how do you measure success or failure with this? So anything you have to help track that. I'm so full of questions for change management because I see this is where I've come to realize this is where a lot of attention is not paid. A lot of attention is paid to let's build this amazing system, throw all the bells and whistles and get all this great fancy stuff in there. I use some loose words here. But if you don't train the users or get user feedback, see, I'm going on a tangent. See, you guys going to pull me in. But it's the same thing. It's because it's like user feedback is like ask the right people. Sometimes you talk to someone about how something needs to work and they are not the one who understands the way it works. I say that loosely because sometimes things may work a certain way due to an existing limitation. So someone needs to have a comprehension or has to be able to comprehend why they're doing what they're doing and what the results need to be, not necessarily the actions they go through.
And how you determine who the right people are. How do you do that?
This is why I'm asking you.
I know that's an important question.
Yeah, there's a little bit of building blocks of at least the foundation for change management. I mean, I was a couple of weeks ago. I was reading a little bit of statistics for our listeners here. That if you think about, I think Gartner did this survey that 73% of employees affected by change say that they're suffering from moderate to high stress levels. Primarily has nothing to do with anything else but a simple communication. Brad and I, you and I talk about just proper communication, not just any communication, but effective communication, because we are designed as humans to keep ourselves safe. So if you don't know what's going on, we tend to worry and feel a little bit more anxious. I always believe there's a book that I read. I can't remember the title at this moment, but it talks about if you look at thousands of years when we were hunter and gatherers, and you stay in the village. So anytime you go outside the village and you kind of look around and you see movement, a slight movement into the bushes, either that's a fight or flight situation. So it's kind of embedded in us that any change into our safe space, we get spooked, we get scared, and we run away. And it's like, I don't want this. I want to be safe. So it totally makes sense that it still lives in our day-to-day lives. When there's a small change in our life, we like freak out and like, what are we doing? Because we don't know. And I think if you plan a little bit ahead, and it's like, hey, that movement is just maybe a rabbit, or it gives you a little bit more preparation and how you would react to those changes, it makes a huge difference in general. So I think that's a good thing to, remember that there's a foundation behind some of these change management.
There's a psychological foundation too. And that reminds me of another book, Who Moved My Cheese, that Brad knows. Maybe you could tell us about that book.
Great book.
Brad?
I read that book every year, once a year.
What's the premise? I mean, I think that's helpful to share the premise of that story.
This premise?
Yeah.
There's 4 mice. They're in a maze with
two
cheese.
Mice.
Or 2 mice.
2 little people.
Or 2 little people. I call it 4 mice, but...
Okay. Yes.
And then it's, they think the cheese is going to be there forever.
But it's not. One day they wake up and it's not there.
And what do you do?
What do you do? So Scurry and what's his name? There's Scurry and the 2 mice. Hem and Haw.
Hem and Haw. That's me and Chris. No, I'm just kidding.
And
we do that.
And Scurry and what's the other mouse's name? Anyway.
So now you put me on the spot. See,
I'm trying
so
to.
bad.
I wrote it. Sniff.
Yes.
Sniff and Scurry. They're always sniffing and scurrying, and they know they have their feels out for what's going on all the time. And when the cheese is gone, they just sniff and scurry and find other cheese because they're adaptable. And then Hem and Haw are just, why is this happening to us? What is this? Not fair.
Folded arms.
Right? And then Haw gets like, okay, you know what? Maybe this isn't working. Maybe I need to go look for other cheese. And Haw begins to adapt. And anyway, it's a cool little metaphor for...
It's a good book, very fast read. I think you can read it in an hour.
Yeah.
Or depending, I think it's 90 pages with pictures, if I recall. But it's a powerful point, and it's what you stated. It's where some people can get irate. It goes back, I think, with Chris, what you were saying. It's my safe space, so now I get all angry and upset if my safe space gets challenged, and it's always somebody else's fault, or it's the system isn't working, or this isn't working because I lost my cheese and I don't know enough how to go find new cheese in the maze.
And I think we also need to be careful not to box people into like everyone is afraid of change or everyone hates change. I look forward to change. I get bored easily. So like when something new comes along, I'm excited. So it's not, but it's thinking about not just people's resistance to change, but like their responses and being conscious of how each individual is taking this news and what they think about it. It's very much a personal endeavor, I think.
That's why there are 4 characters in the book, because not everyone looks at change the same way. Which again, that's why it's a great book.
Is that a learned behavior though? Like, do you have to get yourself to do that? Because, or is it something that's natural to many? Because now it's natural for me. Like any change is like, let's figure out what's going on and what can we benefit out of it. But it took me a while to get there, throughout my career. And it's like, this change is good. I don't know. Is it a learned trait or is it a natural trait?
I think it's a bit of both, but it can I think the important part is that it can be a learned trait. And that's something like on a personal level, both work and in my personal life, I realized, okay, I'm always changing. Like that's that's what's always happening. And, when you stop changing, you're dead pretty much. And so just having that reflection, like, I've always changed. I've changed in this area. Changes are going to happen. Things are outside my control. Some things are within my control. Just having that, like, the internalization of change as something that's part of life, like, really helped me. And I try to communicate that, like, okay, we've done system implementations before. You guys remember it was 9 years ago, but it was similar things. We had similar struggles, and you don't even remember what the old system used to do because now you're so embedded in this new one. And now we're going to change. And just kind of having that dialogue about those fears, but also that you've been through this before and you can do it and you have survived change before. I think a lot of it has to do with that mindset and enabling that mindset. in the people that you're working with.
That is true. And you also have to consider any of these big changes in your organization, and not just ERP is one of the big changes that happens in your organization. But I think it's also important that leadership has to really step up and create that narrative of what this change is coming. You know, wasn't it for, earlier we talked about what isn't it for yourself, but also what is it for the organization, and what does it mean in the future once we implement this? You know, how is it going to affect you? I talked about earlier that, you know, you may have people afraid of change and they end up leaving.
Yes.
I happen to pull up some statistics here from Oak Change Report. It talks about 18% of your employees consider leaving their job when a big organization change occurs. So, and I've seen that firsthand. Where people are like, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm out of here. 18% is pretty big. So if you have a 10 people project that's involved, and typically that's a representative to each of your departments, 18% is a big number. I mean, 2 out of your 10 people at least ends up leaving, and it could be detrimental. Your project can get pushed out because that key player is no longer there.
Yeah, especially like you said, if they're SMEs and like you really can't do without them. But I mean, so what could we have done to prevent that from happening? Really, is the question of change management, I think.
Yeah. I think for me, it's got to be the leadership. It has to come from the very top. It has to be some involvement. They talked about some of these reports. I mean, either Gartner or Oak Change report. It talks about the fact that leadership. It's usually a lack of trust towards the leadership because they're not involved.
Yeah.
So if they're not involved, they're not invested in it. Why am I invested in this? You know, should affect the organization as a whole, as the sponsor, executive, and leadership. But if they're not involved, how are you going to expect everyone else to be trusting of this change? So again, there's a lot of things that you have to consider that building this foundation of what does a good change management looks like. Yeah.
And back to Brad's earlier point, I mean, you said like you or I forgot who made the point, but both of you, I think, you are seeing more of this language in your space, and I see it. I mean, Chris, in your presentation at Dynacon last May, I mean, you had those elements there, and I was like, yeah, that's change management. And there were a lot of sessions that I attended that weren't explicitly about change management, but have those considerations because the people are the heart of your implementation. It's not the technical solution. That's important, of course. That is, what you're implementing, but it's the people who are going to use it. And so we're seeing like more explicitly sessions at Summit that are going to be explicitly about change management because it is an important and crucial piece of the implementation puzzle. So I'm happy to see that. It's exciting. It's a lot of learning opportunities. I mean, for me anyway.
You're muted, Brad, but it's a loss. It's
wow.
I'm sure you have a lot of good things to say. So
everyone is so funny this morning. That's why no one was listening to me.
Oh, were you actually talking?
I could hear his mouth move. I was
paying attention.
I'm curious what he has to say, but
I forgot what I was saying. But you all had some great points. But that's what I want to know is how can we effectively go through a change management process so that we don't create disruption to the business process. And what I mean by disruption is it cause fear in the talent, create unneeded stress, because as you go through these implementations, there's a job that needs to be done. And a lot of talented organizations feel they need to do their job. They want to do their job. They want to do well at their job. So going into a new system, how can we make it easier for them to change?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll share some things. And can I share screen here? Yes, I can.
Yes.
It's right under Brad.
I see
it.
There should be
I see it.
Thing.
Yeah. I'll do that in a sec. But so typically, I mean, you think of a project rollout, you've got like this, lots of documentation, project plan, there's a write-up, gets emailed to people, lots of documentation, right, about how exactly we're going to do things. From a lean change approach, to kind of help with that collaboration bit, there are things called like strategic change canvases that we would do early on. I'll show you what like one of those examples looks like, and I've built them the way I like them and what I like to consider. So it's about that visualization. So you have something that's visible and that you could remember rather than like a Word doc or whatever in a spreadsheet. And also it's collaborative and it's a living document, like a whiteboard, whatever it might be that people are contributing to together. So I'll show you one example of that. And that's like a tool that I would recommend that you do when you're, not when you're deep into, I mean, you can do it when you're deep into the implementation, but like before you even, just when you're thinking about it, right at the beginning. Do I share the whole screen? No, I don't want to do that. Okay, I want to share. There. So I built these in Canva because Canva is easy and I like it. Can you see this?
Yep. I see the Canva. It's a little tiny.
It's a little tiny.
But on the screen you have.
Okay, I'll explain what it is, and then
Yes.
I could share links to stuff later if
Yes,
anybody's
please.
interested. But this is like my canvas that I built. But basically, you've got all these like quadrants and areas. So who would be involved in this? Let's say I'm moving from Nav on-prem to Business Central Online. That's a project that's coming up, and a lot of people are probably in that place or thinking about it at least. Who needs to be in that initial discussion? We get together collaboratively. Either you have an actual physical board where you've got sticky notes up there and people are interacting in person, or we have a online meeting. So the areas that we would focus on in this discussion: the vision. So let's make this a little bigger because I can't even see it.
That's the first one, right?
Vision right here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So we ask questions like, and this isn't like just the project sponsor who's doing this. It's everybody that they think initially should be involved in this conversation. And then you build this document and you bring other people in as you discover who needs to be involved in this conversation. So the vision, why are we changing, for example? What are we changing? How are we changing? We jot those down, very simple terms, so that it's something that we can refer back to. We'll talk about the reason for the change. What's wrong with our current state? What happens if we don't change? What are the consequences if we stay on Nav, for example? What factors are driving the change? What are the resistors for the change? And then there's something called the change force field analysis, like another template that we can use. What are the benefits for employees, for the organization, for the customer? What are the resources that we need? Do we need IT resources? What kind of people resources do we need? Is there hardware, software? That's related to tech too. We specifically look at the tech resources. I'm rushing because I don't want to spend a lot of time going through this. Stakeholders, really important one. Who will be directly impacted by the change? Who will be indirectly impacted? Who needs to be informed? Questions you can think about. And of course, communication. How are we going to promote dialogue and engagement? How will we co-create the change? How will we communicate the change? How will we train for the change? That training piece that you brought up earlier, Brad. And then what are the impacts of the change in different areas, different departments, and how do we define success and other crucial questions? So this is one exercise that we could do. And that
it's an exercise. You have a board with different areas.
Yeah.
And then for each of those areas, like you have the vision, you have the reason, you have the
resources, the tech, the impact, the communication plan. Basically, it's your change plan in a collaborative space that people can go back to and together are creating.
Do you put this all up at once, or are those quadrants at certain intervals within an implementation?
Yeah, I think
as far in the process?
It depends, I guess, on what the project is and how big. This could be like a full day session with your initial stakeholders, or it could be like a couple hours, or it could be like a recurring meeting that we have every, twice a week, once a week, until we kind of map out all of these areas and I think this captures the big picture of the change. And in this exercise, you would identify maybe stakeholders that need to be in this conversation that maybe we overlooked and that we should be talking to facilitate the change. And then, we can use other tools. And let's go back home. Are any of you familiar with BAMSIS from the U.S. Marines? Like, it's their planning approach.
I've heard of it.
Okay, so I kind of like modified that because I like military stuff and they have, I think, they're really good on leadership, but I modified that, so this is like a planning and execution canvas when we get down to the project team.
Looking back at it, when you're going through some of that, you wonder, wow, this is crazy, why is this way?
Yeah.
But when it comes to execute, having all of those processes in place and all of the planning and everything that's done, it almost becomes muscle memory in a sense, and things just move.
Yeah.
I think that the strategy, I try to bring a lot of it back to business as well, because a lot of the strategies that the military follows, I think would benefit in a business in using business fashions.
Yeah.
Even, I don't know.
You can look up BAMSIS and it's really cool. And I modified that to.
How do you spell that? BAMSIS.
BAMCIS. BAMSIS, and this is specific to the U.S. Marines. And I thought it was really cool, and it would make sense in a project context, in a change context. So I changed it to BAG-RES.
What does BAG-RES mean?
BAG-RES, it's such a catchy term. So begin planning. So these are the different phases of the planning process for an initiative. Begin planning, arrange information gathering. So in the military world, that would be arrange reconnaissance. Gather information, revise the plan, execute the plan, and supervise, and then all these other components. So this is the more like scoped, more detailed view, and this would be like for the project team, where we're again planning who's doing what and why, and it's a lot more detailed than the strategic change canvas, which is like a bird's eye view of the change.
So it's begin
planning. So initial meetings. Arrange. Is it too?
No.
Small?
I just want to repeat for those that are listening. They understand what it is. So it's the beginning planning phase.
So this is my take on it. So
yes,
it's not
arrange information gathering.
Yeah.
Then gather your information.
Yeah.
Revise your plan based on the information that you gather.
Right.
Now execute your plan.
Mm-hmm.
Then supervise. So now that the plan is done, it doesn't mean that you're done. You should supervise and go back to make sure that the plan was done effectively, or reevaluate to see if you need to make any additional changes.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of, of course, agile methodologies in the space that you're in. So there's a lot of like feedback and the emphasis on feedback loops and experimentation. So we're going to try this out, see how that works. And then, okay, if it's not working, we meet regularly. You have retros and regular meetings, so that it's not like, okay, here's our plan and we're going to do it's not linear, step 1 through 50, and that's our implementation. Let's break it down into chunks and see how steps 1 and 2 are going, get feedback from users, get feedback from the implementers, and then step back again, and what do we need to change, and we do it again. And
that's textbook agile right there.
Right, exactly. I know, but it's useful because if the project, if the development of the implementation is running in an agile fashion, then so should the user side of it. They should be involved early on and also be part of those experiments and those feedback loops. Another one that I think is helpful. Yeah. Sorry.
Back to your comment, people should be involved as early as possible.
Yes.
Because once you have that inclusive feeling or acceptance of it, they work with it much easier.
Yeah.
And if they feel like they're part of the decision, then if something doesn't work as well, they're usually a little more
they have a sense of ownership.
Exactly.
Change. Yes, sense of ownership, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you. Having a sense of ownership with the project or part of the project helps drive, I think, for better success because they feel part of something versus something that was dropped into their lap and they say, this sucks. I can't do this today.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to do that, and we have to like this needs to happen, and we're going to do it. But then at that point, how much involvement can I get, or how much input can I get from the people who are going to be using it?
Correct. But in that case, even explaining to them why they have to do it goes back to, I think, what Chris, you were trying to get to at the beginning.
Yes.
Sometimes, and again, not all the cases do you have to do this. Again, situation determines the best approach for anything. But generally speaking, if someone says, we need you to move this pile of wood from one side of the eye to the other because the floods are coming, we need it to stay dry so we can keep warm, people are more willing to help
Yep.
versus just saying, move the pile of wood from one side to the other.
Right.
Why? Because I said so. Usually you get a different reaction.
Well, your kids ask you that, like, go do your why? Well, because being.
So you got clean dishes to
Yeah.
eat tomorrow.
Exactly.
Because I said
Because I said so, damn it. Do your dishes. This is another tool that I like to use, change force field analysis. So we've got our change. We map out all our drivers, like what is pushing towards the change, and we kind of give them like a magnitude, and what are the change resistors, whether that's people, whether it's circumstances, whether it's system limitations, and it just helps to see those side by side, so that we can know what we're dealing with, so to know the context that we're in.
Change force field analysis is so you're listing your change drivers, which is what's driving you to change. And then also the change resistors, which the change resistors would be
things that would make the change difficult, obstacles. And sometimes you just decide to remove those entirely if necessary. But you have to
put them together to come up with a change plan.
To initiate a change plan, or at least to know what you're dealing with. Like, are there 10 resistors and then one driver? And then maybe we shouldn't be going through this change. Like, someone thought it was a good idea, but maybe we shouldn't.
I look at this stuff and I chuckle. And I'm going to tell you why I chuckle. It's not because of what you're doing here. And it's something that I
really,
see
this feels that way? No, I'm kidding.
No, that's why I'm saying this. I see this, and what goes on in my head is, of all the implementations I've seen, if someone would have done some of this stuff, things might have been a little easier. Right? I've gone through many implementations where the planning up front helps drive the success versus others who just go with just get it done. Because, it's the old thing is like, we don't have time to plan today, but we have time to spend 4 months fixing what we realized too late. And then you have to pull in. I use it on the implementation side. I talk with a lot of partners. They don't have time to do something today, but in 3 months, they're going to have time to pull everybody off of every other project to come in to help an emergency. To solve a problem that if somebody would have had a little planning up front, they've done. That's why I chuckle, because the value of this isn't really seen, in my opinion, in a smooth implementation, because it went smoothly.
True.
And it went smoothly because you planned, right? Do you follow what I mean? Like, it's hard to measure the value of some things because you don't feel it.
And it's really hard to manage after things are sucky. Like, it's much easier to do it in the beginning.
Yeah, because people don't realize change management also involves risk assessment and mitigation. There are going to be things that will come up. It's the way do you have a plan and how you should react to those changes, right? How do you mitigate for these things to come up? I do want to make 2 points though that it made me chuckle. There are some times, and we feel this too. And even the partner side, where things are like, this is what we're going to do. And then they've already built it. And then I sit back and I'm like, okay, what's in it for me? Like, what do you want from me, right? Oh, we just want you to like it. That's why I chuckle, because a lot of that part of the project doesn't happen, right? I know, Brad. I know what you're thinking there. Number 2, we're talking about in the context of ERP implementation here with Business Central implementation. I do want to make a point that this kind of planning needs to start within your organization.
Excellent
your partner
point.
will not do that for you.
Excellent point.
Not a lot of partners will not do that for you. Their job is to say, I want a Business Central. I said, great. We have all the technical people. Let's go ahead and implement it. We'll tell you what works, what doesn't, but they will not tell you that you need to do change management. That is your responsibility. And if you find good partners, they'll tell you, hey, make sure these are the things that you do now before we do a kickoff meeting, because it sets the tone. Because, sometimes it's not my job to chase your people down. That's
an excellent point, and it's something I've thought about a lot. In my my experience, like, we had an excellent partner, very good communication, did everything that necessary to implement the system. But I've always, like, whose job is it to have managed the people side of that, like the user side of it? Would it have been the partner who says you need these tools, should be using tools? I think I tend to agree that it should be internal to the organization. And And I also, I mean, there's a role for a change manager, like a change manager role that would maybe facilitate some of these tools. But ultimately, I think the message has to be that every single one of you, from the leaders, especially like you mentioned, Chris, has to be that change manager. Own that change, commit to it, but understand why you're committing to it. Like, you know, be wise about that. And it's your job to make sure that everybody else is aligned. Because if you can't do that, then the partner can't do much with your.
It's a partner is called a partner for a reason, in my opinion. A partner is someone that you partner with to have a change, right? You're implementing, in this case, we're talking about Business Central. To me, that partner doesn't own the implementation. They're going to do the part of the implementation that the business needs.
Yeah.
Right. Not every business is of a certain size that they have individuals that can do everything. But as Chris said, talking with a good partner, they can talk about the process that you need to go through. But a business still needs to have ownership, in my opinion, of the implementation. Because once that implementation's done, right, define done, again, it's one of those terms, the business is still using it. The partner will move on to go on another implementation. Then they'll be there to support if support is needed.
Yeah.
But I say that often too, is I don't do this day to day. I can come up with whatever you need, but it's important that it works for you. And as Chris stated, we can say, this has worked for others. This has not worked for others. This is how the application works. This is some, what are you trying to do? These are ways that you can do it. But again, the ownership's not let, Chris decide how to set up and implement Business Central within an organization. And then we're all just going to follow Chris's ways.
Yeah. So in your plan, that you had showcased earlier, your BAGRES,
yes,
right? Your
so
partner is your partner is the execution team, right? They'll guide you there, so they'll know what you're trying, what your vision is. They'll walk you through. They'll guide you, but ultimately, your partner is your execution team, right? So. But other than that, the whole process, you have to own that process, because any changes to that process, it's a change. And so you have to be able to relay that to the rest of your team, to the rest of your organization, of what that change looks like and what that execution looks like. But don't put it on your partner to do all of it for you. It's just never going to work.
Yeah, and if you internalize that and you own it internally, then you're going to reduce that support, the required support from your partner after the fact. Like it's a cost savings, right? Because sometimes, I've seen this from experience, we'll just push it back to the partner because we don't want to investigate and see what we could do I'm running into something business central. I can't do this. I used to be able to do this and I can't do it. If I am committed to this change, I will myself look for solutions. I will do some research and I'll play with the system myself. I'll give it a chance before I say, can't do this. Can you do this for us? So having that change management in place and having your people invested means that they'll own those questions and try to find answers before going back to, submitting a ticket and like, okay, well, do this for me. Just some, and so I've got here process flow. That's another important activity or action I think that should be taken. If, one of the issues that we encountered is we didn't really look at our current process we implemented, but didn't ask and didn't investigate thoroughly enough into how are we currently doing things. And that would have helped, because then we could have identified the gaps with the proposed change and how we would be doing things and identify those. So
you come up with a process flow.
This is so simplified, obviously, but yeah.
So we use a process flow for each of the processes to identify the action, then the process that you follow, and then the outcome of those actions, and then how you can follow that process.
Yeah. You need to know where you are, to know where you're going, like understand what you're doing now.
And I always say why. A lot of times the question of why we're doing something is not asked when it needs to be asked. And to me, I think you have to break it down why until you get to the smallest answer. And asking why is, I think some people think is aggressive or argumentative, but it's not. Sometimes asking why you're doing something can validate. I ask why. It doesn't mean I think the idea is foolish. I ask the why to say, why are we doing this? And if we can validate why we're doing it to a point that makes sense, then it's a good why. Or if someone goes,
you're touching on something Yeah, go ahead.
for no reason. Or we're doing that because Chris 20 years ago decided to start making the tags red.
Yeah.
And we just do it, or just because. We've always done it that way. I can't tell you how many times I hear that.
And so
I don't know why we do this. We've always done it this way.
You've got to be comfortable enough in being able to ask why. And that leads into a whole other discussion, I think, in which change management is housed, is the question of psychological safety at work and being able to have honest. It doesn't mean confrontational, but just like, I have serious concerns and I want to feel like I'm able to voice them. And I see that a lot too, where people are just afraid to say that I think this is not a good idea because they feel like they're going to be reprimanded. So you have to have that culture.
There is, I want to make a point too. Like when we ask why, like Brad, you mentioned, like sometimes why is a tough question to ask because you sound like you're being annoying because people link asking why to children.
Yes.
When children ask too much why, you're like, stop asking me, right? So we need to stop that connection of people asking why. You have to let them, you have to encourage them to ask because they're going to see insights and views, perspective that I, as maybe a supervisor, I don't typically see because I'm not doing all the work. They're doing the work. They're going to tell me. So we need to like unlink that of like the emotions behind someone asking why, but also when you're answering that question of why we're doing it, you got to return it with, wasn't it for you? Why? Easy answer, right? You could say, we're doing this for the organization. It's going to save us money. It's going to be more efficient, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, that person still goes back to their desk and still do their stuff day to day. And you got to let them know why are we, not only why we're doing it, but what does it mean for you?
So let's try to answer that. Let's say for NAV to BC online. Like, so why? What's the why?
GP to
okay,
BC.
I don't know GP, so I'm not comfortable there. But
Neither
whatever.
do I. But GP should be going to BC, so we can just
Sure. So let's say why. I mean, like, can we talk about why would you
go from GP to BC?
You tell me. You're the experts. I don't know.
Let's switch that. NAV is no longer supported, right?
Okay.
Like,
so what does that mean for me as a user?
Yeah. What does it mean for you? Same thing for GP, by the way.
Yeah. Why would you go from NAV to Business Central?
Are you asking me? Are you asking Chris?
Why would you? No, you.
Me. Why would I?
Yeah.
Okay, so from what I've heard, so my parent company is going to go through this now because they're on NAV on-prem and terrified of going to Business Central online because it's not going to be supported by Microsoft, and eventually our partners won't be able to support it, which means if we don't prep ahead of time, we're going to be scrambling at the end, and it's going to be a disaster because we're going to have to implement a change quickly, and we won't know what we're missing if we don't think about it long and hard.
So GP could be considered a similar boat, even though the end of life has been given, 5 years? For the product. They stopped the major support, I think, a few years ago. But again, I asked that why is because why would anybody choose anything to go to a new system, right? There's always going to be a why, whether it's GP, NAV, Business Central on premises to Business Central online, or using QuickBooks to go to Business Central. There's always going to be a reason of why. Mm-hmm. That's why I was just saying.
And why that particular choice too, for example, like why not another system? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not just you're forced to leave NAV or GP because it's no longer supported. I mean, that's an easy decision, right? It's easy why. Like,
Microsoft made that decision for us. So.
Exactly.
Yes.
We have to move, right? That's the why. But some organizations were like, we're just outgrowing. Like QuickBooks is a perfect example. It's still well supported, but to get to the next level, this is why we're moving it to Business Central because it's going to allow us this and that and this and that. And then this is what it means for you. Maybe more responsibility, more roles, right? You can get promoted. Those are things that people would probably want to care about. Like, why are we moving to something different? Well, we're growing. That means that we need someone that's going to be a subject matter expert and gives you some growth. Those are motivational components too of what it means to individuals within your organization.
Yeah.
So
and then you can think about the how, right? When that why is like, okay, that's a fairly easy one in this situation because we don't have another choice. Okay, then how are we going to do it? And then who's involved? And map all of that out and think about it. And And again, dialogue, and involve as many people as you can early on.
I like that. You have to have a dialogue, not a monologue.
Yep.
Right.
These are all good points. They're so. You mentioned common sense before.
Mm-hmm.
I will say it. One thing I learned about common sense is isn't as common as people think, or isn't exactly what people think.
Yes.
I mean, that's what the joke is. It's not as common as you think.
Right.
But it's I think individuals' interpretation of what's common sense, because what's common sense to one may not be common sense to another, and vice versa. So, but I think on here it's just all of this like little, and I don't mean to take away from the importance of it, but sometimes that whole, an ounce of prevention can save a pound of cure, right? This is what I put this in, is some of these little things that you should have anyway, like process flows of your process organization. You should have your processes defined, so that way you can adjust if your business changes, or if something happens, you have subject matter experts that move on to someplace else, whether due to retirement, medical, or even just a change of career. That knowledge you need to have within the organization. And those all help with the time to come for an implementation. Some of the best implementations I've seen have been in cases where people say, oh, they have all this information. They have us. Oh, why do they have all that? But it made it easier because now you're not sitting there listening to people regurgitate things from their brain. And regurgitate is maybe not the proper word, but people pull things from their brain, how they remember it. And I laugh at that again too, because I've had conversations with person on A on Monday. They told me one thing. Same person A on Thursday. They said, no, I didn't say that. This is how we do it. Or I forgot. Or, oh yes, we did it. We do it that way on this case, but in this scenario, we do it this way. And I've been in those scenarios where it's after implementation. They're like, oh, no one asked me about this.
Yep. Well, you said this and I heard this, and we never confirmed that we actually understood each other.
And I think that goes back to your comment earlier about that agile approach, right? Like this can require a little bit of back and forth, that dialogue, that conversation you have to have. Is that you mentioned it's like that continuous improvement.
Yep.
Get some feedback loop, and then figure out, okay, what you said yesterday, why did it change today? Let's figure that out. There's got to be a reason why you changed it. And that also falls under continuous improvement, because you might implement or set up something based upon what the understanding at that point. And then you come and test it and say, yeah, actually, that's not what we're trying to do because we misunderstood. That's not only agile, but I look at it from a change management. It's called monitoring and continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. You got to monitor the changes. Is it going to work? Let's improve a little bit more. So it's a lot of back and forth. And one thing I do want to point out too in a lot of these change management, and I want to hear your take on this, Nelly, is you read the book Atomic Habits?
Best book ever.
I have not, and I should. I'll write that down.
Yes.
It's a great book, Atomic Habits, and it's the small things that you, the small steps you take, and also gives you little wins, and it becomes
that's big
addicting.
In change management. Yeah, you see those.
It's very
wins.
addicting.
Yeah.
You want the small win. I do want to make a point that it's not all about mitigation of risk, mitigation of changes in the people, but you got to stop and celebrate the small wins.
Yes.
Whatever that looks like, because it releases endorphins and excitement that, hey, what we did and the effort we put into it.
Yeah. And people's contributions to making those small wins happen, not just the win itself, but like, thank you for doing that made this possible.
And then you get addicted. It's like, I want more.
Right.
What else can we do?
Yeah. No, it's a true fact that Atomic Habits is a great book. I can share some others with you. Yes. Deep Work, Stolen Focus, all great books that we'll talk about a lot of this as well.
And something actually I wanted to ask you guys about, and it's one that I recently heard about. It's called open source change management. I'm sure you know about open source, like in software. What does that actually mean? Can you explain what that means to me? And then I'm
open source. Yeah. Open source is in software in general. It's more or less where the software that's developed to drive something is made publicly available, and the community, whomever or the public, can contribute to that. Usually there is something or someone who manages that to bring in some of those changes, but it's in essence
open contribution.
Okay.
Well, it's open contribution and open source might be a little bit different, but open source means that anybody can see the source code and then also make changes or propose the changes to that source code to make improvements. It's a lot will follow with the process. Some don't like it because if it's a business that drives off it, if you think of like Linux and some of those other operating systems, people are like, oh, I'm fearful that, someone will take it and make money off it or something. Others look at it as, if you have Chris and Brad doing development of an application, we're only going to see one small area of it. But if you open up and you have many eyes on it, if there's any security risks or any feature risks or any functionality, people can make it a better product for the community.
Yeah, I could see how that might parallel into whatever open source change management is. I need to learn more about it, but someone brought it to my attention. I just wanted to kind of know the origins of that. And then you, Brad, came up with like something mind-blowing in your blooper on LinkedIn when you said testing change management without a comma. So I thought testing change management was a thing, but you meant testing, comma, change management. And I was like, oh, I'm intrigued. What is testing change management? But it makes sense because... It
does make sense.
Yes, let us know why.
Why? Oh,
yeah, you tell us.
I'm on the other side now. I'm being interviewed. No, I think testing change management, as we had gone through this, we talked about all the process that you would go through to implement change within your organization. You need to test that process to make sure that the process is going to be effective for your organization, the process that you decide to follow. There's many options available. Similar to what we said, there's not a cookie cutter approach earlier to anything. In essence, there isn't a cookie cutter approach to change management. Therefore, you need to test to make sure what you're going to follow is effective for your organization.
You should trademark that.
It's been recorded now. Thank you.
Okay.
I did go back and fix it, though,
I did
because
give you
I
credit.
had intended it to be separate, but I like the point. I should go back and unedit it. Well, I edited it. Yeah. I should edit it again.
Yeah, I love that idea because, like you said, we need to test what works in the situation that we're in, because I can use this model in this organization, this system, and it may not make sense here. So test what works and then recalibrate, because that's what experimentation is about. And
change management, we talked about a lot here. Change management, in particular, its implementations. If you had to, you can write it down on your notebook if you want and then tell us,
yes.
Or you can tell us here. Chris, maybe I could ask you too.
Okay.
See, what are the key points you would like someone to know about change management or take away from the need for change management or what change management does?
Okay. Change management makes your life easier if you implement on all sides, from a partner perspective, from a leadership perspective, from a people perspective. It will make your life easier because you will be able to point out where things are going wrong and fix them as soon as possible. And you will make people feel valued, be valued, actually, not just feel valued, be valued in the changes or the initiatives that you want to implement. And I've said this this is kind of what drives me. Business development is people development. There's no business without people. You develop your people, and part of developing your people is this change management bit, involving them and valuing their insights, and your business will thrive. And I guess the other takeaway is change management should be the responsibility of everybody. And you need to own that and make it everybody's responsibility. That doesn't sound very change managing. Make it everyone's responsibility, but encourage it. Encourage that you are important and your insights are important, and we want and value your opinions, so that whatever changes we put in place, we've considered your perspectives and we're grateful for it.
Great. Thank you. Chris, did you have any thoughts?
Just small. I think we had a lot of talking points here, and I think we can go on for another episode, because I do enjoy more of the preparation aspect, and change management's part of that preparation. not only from an organizational standpoint, but individualistic as well. Whether it's supposed to be teamwork or not, but at the end of the day, people work for themselves, so they have to know the benefits. But I look at it, change management, as it addresses, like I think Nelly, you made a point here. It's not so much as a technical; it addresses the human and organizational elements of any transition, and I think it's key. I mean, there's a lot of things that makes up change management. At the end of all of that, it's just assessment, strategy, and very good communication and involvement. And I think I wrote that 3 things in there because that's the most common things that we've done implementations. It's always like people don't have time, which Brad mentioned. He had time. The leadership wasn't involved. They come maybe once every 2 months in meetings, and communication, people misunderstood of why they did it this way. So there's a lot of that, but at the end of it all, take a lot of time, spend that time investment to plan and strategize and put this change management together before you even break ground. It's like building a house, right? Like building a house, a builder could do it in 6 months or less. But it takes a lot of time of planning and, getting the appliances, blueprints and permits. All that stuff takes months. And then a house can be built in 3 months. And
ask your wife what she wants. Ask your husband what he wants. And, consider the kids' needs.
What kind of floor do you want?
It's a good analogy that you have there about building a house. It's similar to what I was talking about, like building a deck or a project or something, where it's much easier to move a wall during the planning phase than when the house is up.
Yeah.
Because you realize that somebody misunderstood or misspoke something. So your analogy, Chris, is perfect. If you do proper planning up front, you can put the house together quickly.
Because like the bathroom, that's not where I want the bathroom, Brad.
If you don't know what you're looking for and you're constantly moving, it will be costly because you have to tear down the walls and create new plans and put them up and make sure things work properly. So
sometimes it's just a conversation that needs to be had. That's it. And
no, it's a great analogy. I like it. I'm going to steal it.
I like it too.
So you can steal it too.
I'm going to steal it.
Well, Nelly, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. We appreciate all that you have to share. I definitely would like to continue this conversation.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear viewers' inputs too, because I know there's a lot of thought around this.
Oh, yes,
certainly.
There's a lot. And with that, how would someone be able to get in contact with you to learn more about change management and your approaches to change management and all of the other great things that you do?
Bagres.
Yes, Bagres. It's just so catchy. You're never going to forget it.
I'm not going to forget it.
Bagres.
I'm going to be like Bagres.
Sometimes I'm creative. Sometimes it's like, what did I do there? But anyway, I consider myself a student of change management and of everything, I guess, of life. And so I'm still learning, and I'm always trying to learn from others. So I appreciate any input. But easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. Just search my name. I should be there. And I wanted to show you guys something. So I didn't realize you were celebrities in the Business Central world before I got to know you, and I watched a few episodes. So I'm like, oh, they're actually people know who they are. So I'm sorry, but I'm honored and
wait.
I didn't know who you were. Anyway, no, it's a compliment. I'm just wanted to say thank you.
No, thank you
for having me in the Dynamics Corner chair. And I made a sign, but my C's look like L's, but they're meant to be corners. Like I was trying to be clever. I should have done So I'm in it.
Look at that! You're sitting in the Dynamics Corner chair.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
My Dynamics Lorner, whatever that is.
Wait, we have to get it, Chris. That has to be the cover photo.
Screenshot.
Cover photo.
Here you go. Get a good one. There you go.
Get it, Chris. I got it.
You got it. Good. That has to be the cover. Now, what is on the back on your wall?
Ancora Imparo. That's my tattoo. Ancora Imparo. It's Italian for still learning. I don't know if you know the story, but Michelangelo, the famous Michelangelo, the painter, Sistine Chapel, and creation of Adam.
He wasn't on the podcast, so we don't know.
Yeah, we're buddies. I talked to him. Yeah,
I do love that you're a student, and that's a good mindset. I've always had that mindset. I know Brad has. I call it white belt for life.
Yeah.
I was going to say it. You took it. That's Chris. I was going to say I stole another one of Chris's sayings. White belt for life.
White belt for life.
I'm a literal jiu-jitsu white belt for life because I had to stop, and I just stayed at like one stripe for like 2 years, but. Yeah, white belt for life, and you always have to be a student. I mean, you have that mindset, you do well in life. But Michelangelo, they asked him when he was like 80 something about his skills as a painter, and he said, "I'm still learning, ancora imparo." So
it's true.
motto.
I learn something every day. I really do something about life, and when you get to the point where you don't think you need to learn something, or you have nothing left to learn, that
you suck.
Says something else about.
I'm underground at that point, 6 feet underground. If I stop learning.
All right, Nelly, thanks you very
guys.
much.
This was fun.
I look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you
Likewise.
again. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you, Chris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.